presented, I work for a company called Ermetic. Ermetic provides a comprehensive cloud security solution. So we have technology that integrates with your cloud environments and basically can be used as a platform to simplify the process of managing your cloud security strategy. And we'll touch a bit about the product. This is not a full product presentation. If you like what you're hearing and you're going to be more interested, then we can accommodate you and have even a personalized presentation of the product later if you want. But the topic of today's presentation is what we like to call security through maturity. So this is a concept that we've constructed in the company based on our experience working with many, many companies for which we've helped mature and promote their cloud security posture, mostly, of course, using our product, but also across the company. And we've built this framework called the Cloud Security Maturity Model that I'm going to present. And it's basically the missing puzzle piece, as we put it, of building a mature, modern cloud security strategy for a large enterprise who is utilizing the cloud for a lot of their activity. There can even be cloud native, they can be migrating to the cloud. So basically, practically almost every enterprise in the world today, I think that very few actually don't utilize the cloud in some capacity or another. So what this presentation is going to be mostly about is about this framework, why it's important, how you can use it, where you can get it, and we might touch a little bit about what we do at the end. Again, depending on time, and if you want more information, of course, it's gonna be available to you, and we're here to serve you if that's what's required. So let's get right down to it. So when it comes to cloud infrastructures, they're very unique certain challenges when it comes to securing it, when it comes to cybersecurity. So first of all, it's really not a one-size-fits-all practice. It's something that is very different for many organizations because of how flexible it is, right? You can basically do everything today using cloud platforms and their configuration. And because of the different business functions and the requirements for each company, you can't really say, okay, just do this list of things and everything's going to be okay, right? It's not the way it works. The other thing is that it's multidimensional. It's very, very complex, right? Imagine what happens with the cloud, right? With the entire transition is that basically everything that we know in infrastructure, in IT, has moved itself to sort of a platform that we can manage using text files and using a simple, right? Supposedly cloud console, where we can actually configure our entire infrastructure. But that is, of course, very, very complex because there are all sorts of variables that you manage when you do this in the infrastructure, right? Now, this makes the environments very, very dynamic, right? They change frequently. And the reason for that is because it's possible for them to change frequently, right? When there is a possibility for that from the infrastructure, what of course happens is that business requirements keep on coming up, and that makes the environment change all the time, right? And this poses a very, very big threat for us as security practitioners, because as security practitioners, of course, we like stability. We like to look at things and know exactly where they are, and so we can, supposedly control them. Now, cloud security or cloud practitioner in general requires a lot of very, very specific knowledge, and knowledge that is not that easy to come by. I mean, of course, you can learn it. There are courses about it. You can practice it yourself. You can, of course, hire people, but all of these things, as compared to what we generally know in IT, they're still very, very new, right? So there are very few people, in proportion to the working population, there are very few people who are actually experts and very extremely proficient at utilizing this knowledge. And there's also still very, very big challenges when acquiring this kind of knowledge. And of course, it's very, very required if you want to do this security practice well. Now, another thing is that all of these things are now combined with a lot of people within your organization that are stakeholders in your cloud environment, and they now also have sort of access to it because it became that much accessible, because it's all laid out in the cloud. It's not the same as when things were on-prem, right? When you had your servers in their rack and then the entire network infrastructure, things have become a lot more distributed, right? For a lot of good purposes. And that, of course, has a lot of advantages that we're also going to touch on. But that also poses a challenge, right? A political challenge within the organization, which also, of course, corresponds with another technical challenge of how you manage it. So all of these things, eventually, what led us to the understanding that if an organization really wants to do cloud security properly, it must look at it as a growing experience. Right? It has to be guided. It has to be synchronized throughout the organization. All the knowledge bases need to be built in correspondence with one another. And a lot of various domains have to work together in order to bring the organization into a place where it's very, very mature and very, very adaptable and can rely on a secure infrastructure built in the cloud, which is, of course, a great thing. I think one of the greatest engines of modern IT infrastructure is, of course, the cloud. This is a very, very good thing to adopt. It's a business driver, which is amazing, but it has to be done securely. So cloud security cannot be achieved in a single bound. This is the main message. If to summarize what I said before about all these challenges, is that cloud security, specifically cloud security and security in general, but specifically this is true for cloud security, it cannot be achieved in a single bound. It has to be an iterative process. It has to be something that you do all the time. It has to be something that your organization thinks about all the time. And of course, it takes a lot of resources. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of focus. And this is the real challenge that we have today as security leaders, whether we are consultants that provide the service, whether we are vendors, and of course, if we are on the front line, if we're the CISOs of an organization, or if we're leading the cloud security practice of an organization, this is our challenge in leading our organization to be cloud secure, to be mature in the cloud. Right? This is really a leadership and a technological challenge that we have to face. So this, for example, is a very good body of work that exists today. This is the enterprise architecture reference diagram from the Cloud Security Alliance. Right? So it's an amazing body of work. This is actually a reference for a PDF. I think it's like 90 pages long that has a lot of different kinds of domains referencing cloud security that are relevant for an organization to assess itself on and then give a reference as to how it can move itself forward in these domains. Now, of course, this is a great body of knowledge. The Cloud Security Alliance is an amazing organization. However, if you want, as an organization, to iteratively advance yourself and to constantly assess where you're currently standing in order to mature yourself, because as we came to the conclusion that this process of growing your cloud security needs to be a maturity practice, and that maturity doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen at a single quarter. It doesn't happen in a single year. It takes a very long time. You have to have some sort of compass that you use to constantly assess your organization. Now, if you put something like this on the table and you tell your organization, look, I want to have an assessment of where we stand in each one of these parameters in each one of these domains, then that's probably going to take a long time. It's probably going to be something that it take a long time to evaluate. And it's important to do so, but of course, it's an amazing project, and it's very hard to do this every once in a while. When I say a while, I mean even every once in a year, let alone once in a quarter or once in a month. So what we came to the understanding of is that in order to lead this kind of process, there's a missing piece of the puzzle we said before, and that is a framework that would be a utility that allows you to actually make this kind of assessment and set milestones based on it and do it in a very comprehensive and holistic way every once in a while. And every once in a while, it can be every once in a quarter, every once in a month, even every once in a year, right? Which is something that would still be great. But there really is some sort of a missing piece of that kind of a lightweight and approachable and effective framework, which is of course what we are introducing, what we build in this framework, which I'm now going to present. So this is what we're talking about: the Cloud Infrastructure Security Maturity Model, which is a lightweight, approachable, and effective framework for doing exactly that, right? For taking the practice of securing a cloud infrastructure and breaking it down to the proper domains. So we broke it down into domains relevant to the organization, that is the people and the processes relevant in the organization for managing the cloud security strategy, and domains relevant to that technology. So that is visibility, prevention, and detection. So we took each one of these domains and we broke it down into relevant parameters. Now, when I say parameters, I don't mean 40 parameters or 100 parameters. I mean, in each one of those, it's between 2 or 5 parameters that are relevant to look at. And for each of those, we defined a level that basically splits organizations into 4 levels, right? And we're going to see it to the point. I'm just breaking down the overall themes. So the levels that organizations are split to are, first, there's ad hoc. Of course, as we go along, it grows in maturity. So an ad hoc level organization in its cloud security is an organization that basically does security as an afterthought, right? They don't really do security in a structured way. They just do security when they do security. And I'm not saying that they're not doing anything. There are very few organizations that actually don't do anything when it comes to security, but they don't do it in a structured way. So if there's a fire to put out, they're going to put it out. If there's something that's screaming that they have to do, they're going to do it. But there is no structured way. There is no plan behind it. Opportunistic means that it's an organization that has this structured way, that has something built into their roadmap, and they do it in a thoughtful way, right? But what they are missing, and this is what leads us to the third category, is the ability to repeat the strategy whenever they need to. So in the opportunistic level, you'll build a strategy, you'll have a structured plan, but let's say that there's now a huge change to your infrastructure, right? There are new business requirements, you have a new product, you've made an M&A, or you have new people coming in, you need to open it up to a third party, et cetera, et cetera. There are so many scenarios, and we talked about the dynamic nature of cloud infrastructure that require you to of course, respond to it and to adapt to it. And in the third level, what we found is organizations that are able to take their strategy and basically repeat it in a very reasonable way, in a very effective way. Now, in the fourth level, what happens is that the security practices are actually automated and integrated. They're embedded into both the organization and its processes, and also its technology. So security almost happens by default, and it requires very little more additional attention. So the organization can actually focus its attention when it comes to cybersecurity on advancing it completely, right? Advancing it in the most effective way, because a lot of other things just happen in an automated way, in an integrated way. So basically, these are what we talked about before. We had the domains, and these are the levels. And of course, what you can imagine comes next is a matrix, right? So we have 2 matrices, one for the parameters revolving around organization. So that's people and processes. And you can see here the parameters. Now, the text is blurred by purpose, because when I go over these slides, I don't like people trying to read them. Don't worry, we're gonna go into them. And of course, we have a matrix for the parameters around the technology as well, the visibility and prevention and detection. And as you can see, there are very few parameters, right, compared to other models. But not just that there are very few parameters, but you can see this is the actual text, right? It's blurred, you'll see it later. But the point is that there's very little text. Now, this is not an extreme minimization. This is the actual scope, or the amount of text that we put sort of into the description of each parameter. And this is where the real power, or the real potency of this model comes to mind. In other models, or in frameworks that you adapt, you have like a huge checklist, right? There are a lot of things that you take into account, and you have to do them. And I bet you've seen those, right? I bet they're like, they're many pages long, or they guide you to tutorials which are many pages long. And that is, of course, very effective, because you get a lot of knowledge right out of them, right? They're a huge knowledge base. But as we mentioned before, they could be kind of overwhelming. So the way this model is structured, in each one of the parameters, what we actually put in is what we call an indicator of matriculation. So the indicator of matriculation is not a comprehensive list of the things that the organization needs to do in order to achieve it. However, what it is what we've noticed as a company, working with our clients and working with other companies, is we've noticed there are certain things in each one of these categories. There are certain attributes and certain abilities that once they are achieved in an effective way, they are a clear indication that that organization in that parameter has matriculated to a new level. They set that organization apart. Now, the interesting thing about these things is that they're very simple to understand. They're simple to understand, they're simple to articulate. They might not be simple or easy to achieve, but they are very clear. And this is the real potency of this framework. Instead of having like a huge checklist that you go and you share with your colleagues, and you try to get people on board, look, these are the things that I'm actually trying to achieve. What this allows you to do is to basically paint a clear picture of where we want to be. And all these things, of course, makes perfect sense, both in an operational point of view and in a security point of view, even to people that are not security professionals. And this helps you to really paint a clear picture as to what you want to achieve. And this helps you drive and lead your organization forward. Now, the best metaphor, and of course, we're going to look at examples, so don't worry if it doesn't land right now, sort of. But the clear metaphor for this is the trip to the moon. So in the 1960s, of course, we all know President Kennedy set a goal that he wants to take America to the moon, and that was a very clear goal, right? It was very simple to understand what he actually wanted to accomplish, right? And that achievement, that process, actually gave the world a lot of benefits. Technology-wise, a lot of things were developed that are now used in other verticals and other domains. And I think roughly 400,000 people were involved in that process, in that project. It was, of course, a very hard thing to do. But when President Kennedy said it in 1962, it was a very clear thing, right? It was very easy to understand what he actually wanted. And that's exactly how a lot of people got behind this, because it was very clear what's the idea that he wanted to accomplish. So the principle here applies, right? And now we're going to actually see a few examples, and then it will probably make, I hope at least it will make a lot more sense. So let's look at a few examples. Let's look at how this model turns out, and then we can talk about how you can actually apply it. So for example, we have the people category. So what we've seen is that the people who actually do cloud security in organizations, they really change when we talk about these 4 levels. There are organizations where there's simply no dedication, no training, no assignment of cloud infrastructure security as a practice, as a discipline. Now, when we go to the opportunistic level, there is some kind of practice, there's some kind of knowledge base, there are some members that are actually assigned to do it. And in the repeatable model, it basically goes throughout the security team. Now, in the automated and integrated level, what happens is, and this is of course the clear path, the clear indicator of matriculation to change to the automated and integrated level, is that there not only cloud security awareness when it comes to R&D teams, but there are also delegates in the R&D teams that actually do cloud security. Now, the reason why this is important is that it also corresponds with another parameter in the processes category. So the remediation process, that is the process of dealing with cybersecurity findings when it comes to the cloud, also built out, of course, in these levels. So in the ad hoc level, there is, as we said, no real structure for it. They just fix it when they fix it. In the opportunistic level, there's sort of a prioritization process of maybe an automated tool or CSPM that actually finds problems. And in the repeatable way, these are prioritized and actually shared automatically with the stakeholders. Now, in the automated and integrated level, and this is, of course, what you can aspire to, is having ownership of the remediation within R&D teams. Now, again, as we said before, this is very clear to articulate, right? It's very clear to articulate as a goal to say, I want R&D teams to be able to resolve the issues in the cloud infrastructure they utilize, right? I want them to be able to take ownership of these security issues. Now, it's very hard to achieve that as a company, right? It's very hard, but it's very clear. So once you get to that level, once you get to a point where not only are findings automatically found, but they're also shared, then you can say this, right? And you can get to this level once you have a tool that actually finds in an effective way security findings. And of course, in order to do that, you need to have some kind of a security strategy. So this is the growth process in the remediation parameter. And this, of course, corresponds with the parameters that we saw before, right? So this makes perfect sense, because if you want to build this kind of strategy, you need to have the team and you need to have the kind of responsibility assignment that corresponds with it, along with the growth of the actual process itself. And of course, this has tools corresponding to it growing as well. Now, the same process goes to all the other processes that we mapped out. So you have the integration to your CI/CD pipeline, right? So in the opportunistic level, of course, a big change for that would be a proper process for governing change management. Again, a very clear example of saying this is something that we want to achieve, right? To have a clear process of change management in the cloud infrastructure. When you say that, that makes perfect sense, even to C-level executives, but it's very hard to achieve it, right? Enforcing this kind of process within your organization is hard. Same as managing infrastructure as code, right? It's a very clear goal to get to, but very hard, very, very hard to achieve. If you have this kind of experience with infrastructure as code and how you manage it in a repository and have the process for pull requests and stuff like that. So same thing goes with compliance. Due to time constraints, I can't really go over all of them. Same thing goes to access governance. Access governance is something that we also found as something that put organizations in a big challenge, in a big spot, because it's very hard for them to actually enforce a process of going over permissions and entitlements within organizations that make it sure that they only have the proper permissions that they actually need, right? So of course, in the opportunistic level, you first just make sure that people are in their respective buckets based on their business function. But actually, in order to understand completely what are the actual permissions that they have and understand the risk from it, that's a completely different level. And doing it for all resources and identities is, again, very a whole other level. Now, another example is the incident response. So the incident response also grows from a point where you do not have a playbook. You're not ready in order to face or respond to events that happen in your infrastructure. And by the way, this does not only include technical aspects, as we've seen from the last 2 or 3 days. Also, communications outside of your organization is a very, very big part of it. In the opportunistic level, you have a manual playbook. In the repeatable level, you have it tested organization-wide and people are on board. And of course, in the automated level, it's very easy to understand the ability to automate this, right? To orchestrate this or to orchestrate certain parts of the playbook in an automated way. Now, the same process goes with the technology aspects. So we map out things relevant to visibility. So your ability to look at your inventory and to be able to query it in an effective way. This is, of course, changes very differently between different levels of organizations. And from the point where organizations, basically when you ask them, okay, so where's your inventory? How do you know what resources you have? They would go to the cloud console, right? And this is probably the first time they would actually try to answer the question effectively of what kind of resources they have and what kind of information they have about it. Now, in the opportunistic level, they start actually doing some pre-processing and maybe store it locally, start asking themselves questions ahead of time about what kind of resources they have and what kind of information there is on it. In the repeatable stage, they actually use some sort of inventory management tool and also classify the resources based on their relevant business functions. And in the automated level, this is where things get really interesting. They have the ability to perform filterable and searchable inventory activity. So actually queries that allow them to easily answer questions when they need to about certain resources. For example, they can ask themselves where they have storage that was created recently that is still not encrypted, for example. And in that aspect, they also have the ability to automatically, based on heuristics logic, classify their inventory. So automatically, once it's created, it's already classified into its business function, and that allows them to treat it well operationally and also from a cybersecurity perspective. Now, in the prevention space, this is probably the most interesting one, and it's split into identities, entitlements, data, computing, network. Again, sorry, due to time constraints, I can't really go into the different level. I'm just going to give a few examples. So, for example, in the identity spaces, that's how you manage your identities. It really changes from just doing the best effort to then implementing some basic best practices like MFA or password complexity and stuff like that, to the point where you actually have the ability to do something thoughtful as retiring static credentials. A lot of people don't really understand this requirement and why it's so important until they actually try to implement it. Static credentials are probably one of the worst things that there are in the cloud security identity configuration today, because what happens with them is that they leak, right? You put them on buckets or you put them in source, and you put them even sometimes in resources by accident, of course, sometimes in resources that are public to the internet. And that is how malicious actors harvest and get the front door keys to your infrastructure. And the challenge with it is actually making your organization understand how important it is not to use static credentials and remove them from the usage of CLI of developers, and remove them from the workloads and environment variables and find them everywhere where they exist in your environment. That's an extremely hard process, but it's very, very easy to articulate it, right? When you say in your management meeting, I want to retire the use of static credentials in our cloud environments, that is something people can understand. That is something people can actually relate to. And in the automated and integrated phase, we talk mostly a lot about retiring unused identities and credentials. First of all, finding them, which is very, very challenging. Also, entitlements, managing the permissions that identities have. The kind of segregation that you do for data is also a very, very huge separator. How you treat computing and serverless. The interesting point about this is a lot of organizations find that a lot of organizations think this is the entire battle, right? But of course, this is just a part of a big chain of layered security and how you actually secure your infrastructure. So in what level do you actually look at the security that your workload has? And of course, network infrastructure, network access infrastructure, etc. Now, finally, there's the point of detection. So what kind of logs and what kind of abilities do you have on them? So just a few more points, and then I'm gonna take a few questions. This process or this approach actually syncs your efforts into effective strike. So you make sure that whatever effort you put into security is actually worth the most because it corresponds with other efforts that correlate with it. Now, it also helps you to design reachable and practical and clear milestones, because what you can do is you can actually see in each point where you are, and then know in what stage you are, and then look at the next stage and say, I want to reach there, and then take the milestone from there and set it as what your organization needs to accomplish. And that allows you to have a very collaborative language between stakeholders, because this is, of course, very clear. It helps you set really clear milestones. Now, this is not a massive step-by-step document. It's not something that will tell you exactly all the things that you need to do, but once you set these milestones, it will be very, very easy to actually draw from it the corresponding things to do, because in order to achieve them, inevitably, you and your organization will have to use it. So the way you operationalize it is make an assessment of your organization, set milestones based on whether you want to fortify your current position, so have a better performance at the level where you currently are, or if you want to achieve the next level, and build a roadmap in order to achieve it. Then evaluate solutions in order to meet these challenges. Do it and then do it again, right? Repeat this entire process. And this is the real advantage, because this is something you can do, again, every once in a while. Now, just a few more things to take away. This is a process, right? Cybersecurity is a process, not an event. And when you reach a certain maturity level, it's a commitment, right? So you have to keep on repeating these processes again and again and again. And in order to do that, you need to have technology that supports you, right? Because even though the milestones that we set here are simple, it doesn't mean that they're easy to achieve it, right? Especially in something as dynamic and as complex as cloud technology. And in that aspect, I just want to take like a couple of minutes to discuss what we do as a company. So our product basically integrates with your cloud environment as a SaaS platform, right? You don't need to do any kind of installations. It reviews configurations and review logs in your environment, of course, in a multi-cloud ability. So we connect with Azure, AWS, and GCP, and provides you a single pane in order to look at all of these information and configuration and analysis coming from all these environments put together. And we give you the abilities in order to support all the various domains that we talked about and help you move your organization forward. So we give you full inventory management. We give you risk prevention. We give you the ability to detect. We give you the ability to take all the findings and all the suggestions that we do and remediate them in a shift left format when your infrastructure is managed as code. And we also take all this information and embed it in certain governance and compliance standards that you probably have to meet. So just a few screenshots. So this is how our inventory, for example, will look for AWS specifically. This is our analysis of IAM permissions, which is very, very hard to do when it comes to AWS. So this will take a machine, for example, and see what kind of roles it uses, what kind of policies it has, what kind of entitlements it can use. And by reviewing the logs, it will actually tell you which of these are necessary, right? And then it will allow you to build a policy that replaces the over-permissive one and limits to the minimum what can be done by any kind of workload to reduce the amount of danger that happens if it actually fails and compromised. We give you a list of security posture findings for you to remediate and share across your organization. We have a very, very robust investigation platform by looking at your logs, being able to query them, seeing exactly what they mean. We have an anomaly detection platform. So by reviewing logs and behaviors, we can see events that might be part of a cybersecurity campaign by a malicious actor, in case they haven't happened before by that specific identity. We, of course, enable shifting left and integrating resolution into infrastructure as code. We provide with network visualization and also embed all this information into compliance standards and articles to easily understand where your cloud infrastructure currently stands with compliance standards that you might have to respond to, right? So this, as you can probably understand, this is sort of like the vehicle that can take you through the journey of maturing your organization. And so if the framework that we discussed in this presentation is the compass, right, that tells you which ways you need to go, which are the milestones that you need to set in order to move your organization forward, then this, our technology really is, the way we see it, is really is the vehicle that can take you really, really fast by doing a lot of the heavy lifting that you need to do today as security professionals. And by using it correctly across your organization, you can really, we can really take it forward with ease. And we're going to publish this in a white paper really, really soon. And we're going to have an online questionnaire so you can go through it and see where your organization stacks up and get a review immediately. And of course, you can reach out to us for a personalized assessment and just see exactly where you need to stack up, and also see a demo or even a POC of the product on your own network, right? On your own assets, and see exactly what kind of findings or where's your blast radius from each potential compromise in your cloud environment and what you can actually do about it. So thank you so much for listening. I'll just see if there is anything in the chat.
I think we have to ask, can we have some questions?
Yeah, sure. So now we can have questions. Sure.
Anybody wants to know more about the maturity levels? Any doubt where you guys are at currently, at which maturity level your company is? Girish is asking, do we have LSE as well supported?
Yeah, so we do support integration with infrastructure as code. Yeah, of course. We do have integration with infrastructure as code. So as I've shown in one of the slides, just a second. What we do when we find a finding, for example, here, this is a finding of a policy which is over permissive on a specific workload, and by our analysis, we saw that according to the logs, what that workload actually does is just perform these actions on these buckets. We are actually able to replace this policy, right, which is very, very permissive, right? If you, of course, know AWS, you know that these stars mean that the policy is extremely permissive and allows the workload access to all the S3 buckets. We replace it with these with this very, very right-sized policy based on its actual behavior. And this integration with infrastructure as code allows us to generate a Terraform script that can then be inserted and be used as part of the infrastructure as code to remediate that policy. So that is the support for that.